Hi everyone, hope you guys are all having a great day today. In today's video, I'm going to cover the whole entire market in terms of the S&P 500, Dow Jones, Nasdaq, specifically the ETFs in terms of the SPY, QQQ. Going to cover the economic calendar, 10-year treasury, crude oil. Also, in terms of my viewpoint, I think we're going to create higher highs for both Nasdaq and S&P 500, potentially for Dow Jones as well. And the reason why is because the economic calendar in terms of for this week is pretty much lackluster. We're going into next week as well. By mid next week, we have CPI and PPI numbers. So if we do not create higher highs, what's going to happen is we're going to get capped at the higher levels and then just get knocked down just in time when the CPI and PPI numbers come in. So I'm going to go through the technicals as well after I go through the economic calendar. Going to give the support levels, resistance levels, price action, and how I think the market's going to move within the next few days and all that stuff. So hopefully you guys like the video. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. In terms of the economic calendar, we have at 11:30 a.m. for Tuesday, May 7th, we have Minneapolis Fed President Kashkar speak, and at 3 p.m. we have consumer credit. Now again, this week's pretty much lackluster, except next week, midway, it's going to be CPI and PPI numbers. So if we do go up to the upside quite fairly quickly, we'll create new higher highs. If we don't, we're probably going to get stopped at the highs when I'm going to go through them later on in terms of analysis. Now, in terms of the U.S. 10-year treasury, we're at 4.49%, so dropping from the past few days. So that is always good in terms of technically more money in the market, technically coming in. Crude oil is at $78.69 per barrel, so somewhat dropping from the past few trading weeks and all that stuff. And then in terms of the QQQ, before I get to QQQ, which is the ETF for Nasdaq, I'm going to go over the VIX. In terms of the VIX, this is a volatility index and showing that right now we're at 13.48 and it's still dropping. So from the indications of the 1 month, 3 month, 6 month and all stuff, it's showing that the volatility is going to still get lowered and go lower, head lower, right? And it's not necessarily always the case that the markets will head up higher with lower volatility in a way, but it tends to be like that in my opinion. Like always, this is just my opinion, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying, selling, FYI, in terms of the whole entire video. And then if we go into QQQ first before the S&P 500, so this is the ETF for Nasdaq. I'm going to show this channel because it's quite important. This is a channel dating back since 2010, and it's upward trend resistance line. And then here's the upward trend support level as well in terms of low side. Now for Nasdaq, we did break through it in 2020 to 2022, but for the S&P 500, within basically the same channel visualization, we did not break through it. Now we did go up to it again after we got underneath it and then got knocked down, went twice to get past it, but got knocked down twice, and then found a support level and heading back up. Now the question is, are we actually heading back up to create new higher highs? Because if you look here the whole entire time, we're past the previous bump since 2022, 2021, and then now we're past it right now, but then heading even higher from the recent highs, which was not too long ago. So dating back since the highest high was give or take sometime in March of 2024 of this year. So we're sitting at $440.25, and then we're being met at the perfect time. So for the S&P 500, it's showing that it's going through a breakout right now and heading to the upside almost fully, besides the short term, because both Nasdaq and S&P 500 show for the short term, hypothetically tomorrow, if not after tomorrow, downside, more specifically tomorrow in my opinion. But in my opinion overall, I think this week is just we're gonna create higher highs in my opinion before the CPI and PPI numbers come out. It depends on how fast we go up. If we don't go fast enough, then we're gonna get met by the upward trend, not upward trend, but like that previous highs we had, like the all-time highs, we're going to get capped by them if we do not get there fast enough before the CPI and PPI numbers come out. Because the day prior, if we are just getting so close to that, we're pretty much going to get stopped right there on the previous all-time highs and not get past them, if that makes sense, unless the CPI and PPI numbers come in better than expected, and then we're going to break through them, which that could be the case as well. And then technically that would be a catalyst to just continue, because then you have better than expected CPI and PPI numbers, and then now you're creating all-time highs for both the Nasdaq and S&P 500, which would be technically a great time in terms of just continue to upside trend, right? So now just to go over the support level or resistance levels that I was mentioning, there's a downward trend resistance level right about here. We got knocked down 3 times. For the S&P 500, we got knocked down 3 times, but we did not have a false breakout just like we do with the Nasdaq. So with the Nasdaq slash QQQ, we had a false breakout, but got knocked down regardless. And then we have this upward trend support slash resistance line. So resistance right about here, support, support, support. And then right about here, we had resistance slash false breakouts at the same time too. And then meeting just at the exact same time with this downward trend resistance line and upward trend resistance line. Will we pass it? It's anybody's guess, because the thing is though, if you go through the MACD line in terms of movements, 5-year is showing downside. It's in the bearish movement, but it's trying to curve up to the bullish movement. There's more of the long term. The 1 year shows bullish movement, so we're in the positive going up. 6 month, it's in the bullish, but technically arching down, and 3 month and the 1 month are arching down, if not already arched down. Yeah. So in the 1 month, 3 month, we're in the bearish movement, technically heading downside, which is exactly perfect timing for these crossovers of the lines. And then the 1 month as well in the bearish movement and showing downside. So technically tomorrow could be a down day. I just don't see it personally. There's nothing really pointing to it in terms of economic news or any reason, but who knows? The markets just could be moved by algorithms or something like that, for all we know, right? But the question is, what are the support and resistance and support levels that we're going to have to break through? So first, we have to break through this cross like intersection kind of thing, and it's around roughly about $441 and some change. Maybe if you wanted to be cautious, just because these lines are obviously not perfect, $442. And then the next level is past 442, which is coincidentally with the horizontal resistance level anyway, 442 give or take. The next level is about 444 and some change, and then ultimately between $446 and to $448 for the most part. Now, I do not believe we'll pass 448 tomorrow dollars, but if it does go just catabolic to the upside like crazy, then we're pretty much going to the 449. There was resistance at 449, even though it's so close to 448 anyway. But the reason why it's going to be resistance at 449, because we're just going to be stagnant there. The previous high was 450 basically, right? So $450, once we pass that, we're just pretty much heading to the upside. And then what's going to happen is too, at the same time, we're going to be clashing with the upward trend resistance line dates back since 2010. Now, will we pass it? I think there's a chance because the S&P 500 has the breakout. But I'll go over that for the S&P 500. But S&P 500 and Nasdaq kind of almost move in sync in a way. One might be volatile more than the other in some days, right? And the drops might be more aggressive than the other on some days too as well. But for the most part, they move together in a way in positive days and negative days for the most part, right? And again, that's just my opinion, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. But if we do head up there quick enough to go to the upward trend resistance line and let's say not break through it, just basically meet it, we're looking at the low $460 price point. If we go there later on, closer to CPI numbers, again, this is just estimates based off right now from the data I see, it's about the mid $460 price point. So about $464 to $466 and some change when I saw it. So about those ranges. Is it going to happen? Debatable. We'll have to see. But for right now, I'm more focused on seeing if we pass $448, between that $446 to $448 price point. Now, in terms of if we do drop down, because again, technically, in terms of MACD lines, they're showing that maybe most likely tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow. But if we break through these, I don't think the next day will really come down. I think if we come down, it'd have to be tomorrow, in my opinion. Unless if tomorrow acts like a false breakout and we just basically coincide with this area right here and then just drop down the next day. That is possible, but we'll see. But either way, so if we do head down, right now we're at $440.25. The next range was to drop down to, I think it was the so it's about $436 to $434, give or take. But then ultimately, I think what's going to happen if we do drop down is to in this pocket, basically about the $432 to $430, $432 to $433 and some change section, but around that pocket. So 432, 433, and then if it really does break down, we, in my opinion, bounce off the 430, maybe the 429 and highs change, so 429 and 80 cents. I do not believe we're going to break down lower than 429. Just because it does not make sense in terms of economic calendar news and all that stuff. But if we do, then we're heading down to, yeah, there's support at the 427, 428, 426, but ultimately down to the 425, 424, and then just like before, the 421 to 420. So 421, like in some change to 420, and I think ultimately pass from that, bounce off that point for sure. There is no way, in my opinion, because there's nothing in terms of economic calendar news that's going to be crazy to pull us down, in my opinion, unless maybe some tensions overseas happens within, like, say, over the night or within the next couple of days. But either way, I think we would for sure bounce off the 421, 420, because we see a bounce off right about here within that 421, 420 range, 421, 2021, 421, 420 range, and then same thing here. So if it does go lower, I'll update you guys within a post, either Twitter/X or /YouTube and all that stuff. Now, in terms of S&P 500, let me see. So S&P 500 / SPY ETF for S&P 500. The 5-year chart shows the same thing as Nasdaq / QQQ. 5-year chart shows bearish movement, but trying to arch up. So technically, we'll be heading up at one point, potentially. Bearish movement shows the upside, so moving up to the upside. 6-month chart shows the same thing as QQQ, which is a bullish movement, somewhat technically arching down to the downside. And then 3-month is already in the bearish movement. You can barely see it, but it's a small red tick. And then the 1 month is in the bearish movement as well. So technically showing downside again, like I stated, either tomorrow or after tomorrow with a false breakout. If tomorrow is the false breakout, then the day after tomorrow, it's the downside. So with this downward trend resistance line, just like QQQ, we tested it 3 times, got knocked down. But with S&P 500, there is no false breakout. But with the S&P 500 / SPY, there is no false breakout. For QQQ and Nasdaq, there was a false breakout. We broke through it. Now the question is, okay, so are we going to just continue the upside? Again, I believe so, just because of economic calendar. Again, just my opinion, not advice. But in terms of MACD line, technically either tomorrow or after tomorrow might be dropping. We'll see. But it'll be a small pull back and then go to the upside ultimately. I think we're just heading up to the upside regardless to create new higher highs before the CPI and PPI numbers come out. So the day before CPI and PPI numbers come out, that's when I think the markets will come down in anticipation, waiting for those data points to come out, right? And then if those numbers are better than expected, in my opinion, if we're really close to passing those highs, it'll be a catalyst to pass them, and then just basically the trend will be to the upside. Again, just my opinion. So the next, right now we're at $516.57. The next level to what we need to pass, like I stated, I believe yesterday, was about the $518 and some change price point. Then after the 518, it was about the 520 to 521. 520 to 521 range, and then there is support or resistance at the 522, 523, but ultimately 520. Okay, so basically 524. So I would say 522 to 524, but ultimately at 524, we're pretty much going to either end some change, just basically get knocked down and consolidate a little bit on the side all the way until we test the 526. Because the 526 is ultimately what the market's probably going to try to push to. Yeah, so 526, and that's going to be the difficult part, because once we pass 526, that creates a new high. For QQQ / Nasdaq, hopefully I covered it, but in case I didn't, it's the $450. So the $450, once we pass it, that creates a new high. But for S&P 500 / SPY, that's about $526. So that is going to be quite difficult. Technically, the market makers, when they sold previously on the high, so like, for example, the 5-year chart, you can see that's an all-time high for the market right about here. They sold before, they could probably sell again, and that's if you're anticipating that to happen, we go up to 526, and then the market sells off again, then you could hypothetically short the market at that point. But I don't know. We'll see. I think what might happen is we might slow down before CPI and PPI, or break through, and then the CPI, PPI come in worse than before. So we do create the higher high, but then we get knocked back down and then just start going down to the trajectory to bounce off, let's say, this upward trend support level, potentially one of the support levels. But we'll see. But those are the levels to the upside. And in terms of the downside, in terms of support, I ultimately think we're going to bounce off this downward trend resistance line and act as support, just like this. For example, just for illustration, just because, again, this week in terms of economic calendar, nothing crazy. I know it's earnings season still for the most part, but I don't see anything in terms of dragging it down in terms of big plays. But if it does, I could easily see the slowdown, for example, the next day. But here's the levels that I think it'll bounce off of, and then I'll cover the lower levels just in case. So we're at $516.57. The next levels that we need to watch for, 514, 515. I think we could probably bounce off 514, 515 possibly. But ultimately, if we were to come down, it would be the 511, 512 price point. And then if you really think it's going to come down to this downward trend resistance line, you're looking at the $510 and some change, but the high 519 and some change potentially, because it depends on how long it takes to get to that level, right? As the longer it takes, the lower the support level will be. So if, for example, if we take to the next few days all the way to potentially showing, let's say Thursday, it's showing high $508 and some change, right? So it all depends. Plus we have the moving averages, so that's good. They could act as support. And then if we do head lower, maybe it's lower now than 507, but yesterday, based off the technicals, if we head lower than $507, we get pulled back down under the 505 and then 503 potentially, hopefully bouncing off the 503, because if we do not bounce off of the 503, we're heading to the 500/high $499 price point. And then, there is support at the 497, 498, but it's not that strong hypothetically, so we might be just hitting the 495. And then ultimately, in my opinion, if we do head lower than 495, again, if we do not bounce off because the 497, 498 will slow us down, but ultimately, I think we'll just head to 495, where if we get to the 495 and it just trickles down that fast, the 493 is where I think, in my opinion, it will stop at. So ultimately, let's just say it just heads pretty quickly down in terms of images, and then we just keep dropping down these levels. I think the 493 is ultimately where we bounce at for sure, in my opinion. 493 and some change. It wouldn't be 493 exactly, personally. But so that's for the levels for these ones. And then in terms of the high side, in case the one thing I want to mention, the reason why I think technically higher highs will happen and then potentially catalyst with the CPI and PPI, potentially, if the numbers are good, just because the PCE numbers, it wasn't that much higher hypothetically, and the market acted favorably to it, which is kind of strange because that is a more precise reading for inflation. Technically, those numbers could come in pretty well for CPI and PPI, except the thing is, energy cost was a big factor for CPI last time, which was accounted for it. So it could still bring it up to the upside, which would knock us down. But if it somehow beats expectations, we head up to the upside, we have a lot of room to grow for S&P 500. For SPY, we don't have that much room hypothetically, or for QQQ/Nasdaq, we don't have that much room hypothetically. But we could have the breakout like we had before and just keep heading up together in sync, hypothetically, if that makes sense. Now for Dow Jones, just to cover it quickly, like we had the channels before, like I mentioned before, heading up to the upside, 5-year chart showing bearish movement, downside and all stuff, but curving up to the upside, 1-year chart, bullish movement, 6-month chart, bullish movement as well. Not really arching down, but somewhat arching down with the light green bars. And then the 3-month, technically it's showing arching down, but it's slightly curved up. And then the 1 month as well in the bearish movement, but it's trying to cross up. So it almost looks like you could disregard the S&P 500 Nasdaq arching down for tomorrow and after tomorrow, because it looks like in terms of Dow Jones, it's just going to try to head up. And the limits for it, because if you look at the limits before, upward trend resistance line, upward trend support level, if we were to get to this level right about here, like last time I checked it, but again, the longer we take, the higher the high will be, if that makes sense. So right now it's showing ballpark about 40,063 points. Right now we're at 38,852 points. And if we head to the downside, it's about, give or take, about 37,000. I remember I checked the last time, it was 37,450 points, give or take. So there's that. But ultimately, in my opinion, again, I think we're going to create higher highs for the whole entire market, basically. S&P 500, Dow Jones, Nasdaq, all that stuff. Unless the CPI and PPI numbers come in worse than expected, like crazy. Because right now, the confidence for the market is they're expecting the Fed to cut interest rates somehow. I don't think that, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to cut interest rates this year. The only way they would is if they feel pressure from the market to do so. And I think just to satisfy the market, they'll cut it one time. And that's the expectation. The market's only expecting one interest rate cut this year. So maybe just to satisfy the market, they might. But we'll see. But that's basically it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hopefully you guys liked it. If you do, consider dropping a like. It does help the channel. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. And if you do want to be notified when I do upload these videos, because I upload them basically daily for the most part, consider following and subscribing so you'll be notified when I do upload these videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.